はい、皆さんこんにちは。お久しぶりでございます。今回ですね、このビデオを紹介すべきかどうか迷ったビデオなんですが、私にできることは知らない方に少しでも情報を知っていただきたいということで、このビデオを紹介したいと思います。では皆さんごゆっくりご覧ください。
After the horrific attacks of October 7th.
Think about October 7th.
What Hamas did on October the 7th.
About what happened on October 7th.
October 7th. The deeds you've heard repeated over and over again. But here's the truth. The conflict between Israel and Palestine did not begin on October 7th, nor did Israel's brutality against Palestinians. It's 1897. The first Zionist Congress is held. The first Zionist Congress convened, led by Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian journalist seeking a Jewish homeland in Palestine, spurred by widespread anti-Semitism in Europe. Fast forward to 1917, the Balfour Declaration, a letter from the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Baron Rothschild, the wealthy figurehead of the British Jewish community, expresses support for the Zionist objectives to establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was occupied by the UK after the defeat of the Ottomans in World War I. 1920, the creation of the Haganah, a terrorist militia formed by Zionist settlers that conducted numerous massacres of Palestinians with the goal of driving them off their land by force and seizing their properties, paving the way for an Israeli state. The tension escalates. By 1936, Jewish immigration into Palestine reaches its peak. More than 350,000 Jews had migrated to Palestine over the course of just a couple of decades, mostly from Europe, boosting the Jewish population in Palestine from roughly 3% in the late 19th century to over 30%. Pressure mounts as indigenous Palestinians deal with land dispositions and economic hardship due to the massive influx of Jews and subsequent demographic shift leading to the 1936 to 1939 Great Arab Revolt. Palestinians stage an uprising, fighting for their land and livelihoods, but face brutal suppression at the hands of British troops. Over 5,000 Palestinians are killed, nearly 15,000 wounded. British forces demolish Palestinian neighborhoods and impose a harsh military occupation. By the 1940s, new Zionist terrorist militias, the Irgun and the Stern Gang, emerge. Alongside the Haganah, they target British forces and Palestinian civilians, using violence to force Britain's hand. In 1946, the Irgun bombs the British administrative headquarters in Jerusalem's King's David Hotel, killing 96. 1947, the UN steps in with its partition plan. On November 29, 1947, the intergovernmental body proposes partitioning Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Christian and Muslim Arab, but allocates over half of the land to the Jewish minority, which owned less than 7% of Palestinian land, ignoring Arab opposition. In 1948, Zionist militias commit at least 30 documented massacres at the start of what becomes known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. The April 1948 Deir Yassin massacre is the most notorious among them. The Irgun and the Stern Gang slaughter more than 100 Palestinian men, women and children in the village of Deir Yassin. 2 days later, the Haganah illegally occupies what remains. It's May 14, 1948. Zionist leaders declare the establishment of the State of Israel, and just 1 day later, the US recognizes Israel as a state. The Nakba, 1948. Zionist militias, the Haganah, Irgun and Stern Gang violently expel over 750,000 Palestinians, 80% of the Palestinian population at the time, from their land, stealing or destroying their homes. Over 2 years, more than 400 towns and villages are entirely destroyed. 15,000 Palestinians are killed. Thousands more are left homeless and stateless, scattered across refugee camps throughout the region. In 1950, Israel's Knesset passes the law of return, granting every Jew around the world the right to settle in Israel while denying these same rights to Palestinians. 1953 marks one of Israel's first major attacks on Gaza. The assault on the Bureij refugee camp kills at least 50 Palestinians in the Palestinian stronghold, where more than 200,000 Palestinian refugees had sought safety after the Nakba. In October 1956, the Suez Crisis erupts. As world attention focuses on Egypt, Israeli forces carry out brutal massacres under the cover of war in Khan Yunis and Rafah. Nearly 400 Palestinians were killed. 1967, the Arab-Israeli War. Israel launches surprise airstrikes on its neighbors, killing some 20,000 Arabs and achieving an overwhelming victory that leads to the further occupation and illegal confiscation of Palestinian land in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Nearly 400,000 Palestinians are evicted from the West Bank, half facing their second expulsion, and the number of Jewish settlers on occupied Palestinian land increases to more than 600,000. It's 1982. After invading Lebanon to weaken the Palestine Liberation Organization, Israel teams up with the Phalangists, a Christian militia which kills over 3,000 Palestinian refugees living in the Beirut neighborhoods of Sabra and Shatila. 1987 to 1993, the First Intifada begins. Frustration among Palestinians living under Israeli occupation was reaching a breaking point, and the death of 4 Palestinians in the car crash caused by an Israeli vehicle triggers a revolt against Israel that emerges in Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp. More than 1,000 Palestinians and 100 Israelis are killed during the first Palestinian uprising. Fast forward to 1993, Israel and the PLO signed the Oslo Accords, effectively ending the First Intifada and supposedly meant to ensure peace and Palestinian self-determination. But the hope fades quickly. 1990. October 7, 2023, following Hamas's surprise attack, Israel begins indiscriminately bombarding the besieged enclave in a relentless onslaught that killed more than 40,000 Palestinians so far, including over 17,000 children, with many authorities around the world labeling it a textbook genocide. While Israel and its allies obsessively fixate on October 7 as the day when the violence began, the real tragedy lies in decades of silence over the ongoing suffering of Palestinians, a suffering that started over 100 years ago and has been systematically ignored by the majority of the world as Israel continues its goal of erasing and exterminating Palestinians, their heritage, the culture, and their future.